Hi, my name is Koller. Right now I'm teaching in the collegiate programs we have here in Jewisha over the summer. During the year I teach in the continuing education program as well. This week's Parashat Balak, presents us with a very distinctive character. Not Balak, but Bilam. Bilam is the protagonist here. He's the main character of the story, and he presents us with a very interesting challenge. Challenge of understanding who this person was, why we care so deeply about him, and what he represents in our thinking about biblical characters. From the beginning, Bilam presents us with the image of someone remarkably devout, remarkably pious, saying over and over that all he can do is follow God. What God allows him to do, he'll do. What God doesn't allow him to do, he would never dare to do. And contrary to some readings that say that he was simply playing games, that he was trying to manipulate, it sounds very much like he's entirely sincere. He really means it. What God wants him to do is what he wants to do as well. But as soon as he sets out on his journey with Balak's messengers, after God allows him to go, he becomes the object of scorn and ridicule. He's mocked by his donkey, who not only talks, very famously, but can see more clearly than Bilam can what's directly in front of him. Bilam's donkey sees an angel right in front of him, telling him which way to go, and Bilam himself can't see. Only later in the story does God uncover Bilam's eyes. God allows Bilam to see what was right in front of him and what his donkey had seen intuitively, instinctively, without having to think about it. The Ramban correctly points out that the point of this is to mock Bilam. That Bilam was not a prophet. Bilam lo haya navi, but a koseim, a magician. Someone who knows how to manipulate magic, but not someone who's really a prophet. But what do we do with this Bilam then? On the one hand, a pious, devout individual, a follower of God, someone who would never break God's will. On the other hand, someone whom the story mocks incessantly, deeply, implying that he's really no more than a sorcerer, someone who doesn't even understand the world as well as his donkey does. Why does the Torah want to paint such a complicated picture? And which one is it? Is he a positive character or a negative character? Some insight into this was gained a few decades ago, in the 60s, when at an archaeological excavation at a site called Tel Der Allah, which is biblical Sukkot, where Yaakov camped on the Yabok River, on the eastern side of the Jordan, a text was found. A text apparently in a strange dialect of Aramaic, from about the year 750 or so, from the 8th century BCE, apparently, based on the language. The text was found face down. It used to be on the wall of a temple, written in ink, on plaster, on the wall, in a very prominent place in the temple. And the text is a story of Bilam bar Beor. The text begins, Sefer Bilam bar Beor, a seer of the gods, a Choseh Elohim. And the gods came to him at night, and he saw a vision of the oracle of El. And at the end of the night, he wakes up, and he conveys the message that he received overnight to the people around him. And he cries, and he mourns, and he fasts, and the people say, why are you fasting, why are you crying? And this image of Bilam is so strikingly similar to the image of Bilam that we have in the Torah, in addition to the name, that it's clear that these are stories about the same individual. Bilam bar Beor, a great seer, a great choseh, whose stories were being told about hundreds of years later on the eastern side of the Jordan, stories that were important enough to be written on the wall of a temple, but also Bilam bar Beor, who presented a threat to Am Yisrael, a threat to Israel. A threat not only in the sense that he might have cursed Israel, but a threat also in the sense that he seems to have insight into the divine. He seems to have a connection to God. And that's a threat to Israel's uniqueness, a threat to Israel's unique standing in the world, unique relationship with God. Chazal don't shy away from this. The Gemara comments, the Midrash comments on the Pasuk, Lo kam b'Yisrael k'Moshe od, never did another prophet arise who was like Moshe. In Israel, the Midrash says, but outside of Israel there was a prophet like Moshe, and that was Bilam. In other words, the rabbis say Bilam might have been even as great as Moshe. And yet, that's exactly why he has to be mocked. It's exactly why he has to be scorned. Because it's good to have great prophets outside of Israel and the other umot ha'olam, and the other nations. But to have someone who can so threaten Israel's uniqueness, to be able to claim that he might have as deep and as close a relationship with God as Moshe Rabbeinu himself, that might be too close for comfort. That might be too much to bear. And so after presenting this picture of a wonderful person who follows God, the Torah then says, but don't think that he was a real Navi. As the Ramban says, he was really just a kosein. He was really just a sorcerer. He has amazing powers, but he's someone that doesn't actually present a threat to Am Yisrael's uniqueness and their close relationship, special relationship with God. Shabbat Shalom.